Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the reorganizational meeting of the Blackhawk School Board of Directors. At this time, would you please stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance with me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. 1.3, there was an executive session prior to tonight's meeting. Those in attendance were Mrs. Klein, Mr. Huziak, Dr. McCosey was not present, Mrs. Mansell, Mr. Shope, myself, Mr. Vanzelinge, Mr. Wisner, and Mr. Zakowitz. One point 4, we have public comment on any agenda items for the reorganizational meeting, and we're checking to see if there's anyone registered. And there is not. Thank you. 1.5, we will now turn it over to Kathy. Oh, we need to make a motion to do that? Okay. Would someone like to make a motion to select Kathy Clark, solicitor, as temporary president for the purposes of the reorganizational meeting only? Thank you, Mrs. Mansell. A second?
I can second that.
Mr. Wisner, thank you. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Evening. First, I'm going to do roll call this evening. Mrs. Klein. Here. Mr. Huziak. Here. Dr. McCosey. Thank you. Mrs. Mansell. Here. Mr. Shope.
Here.
Dr. Sprinker. Here. Mr. Vanzeling.
Here.
Mr. Wisner.
Here.
Mr. Zakowitz.
Here.
I would now like to open the floor for nominations for school board president. Are there any nominations?
Dr. Springer.
I will second.
Okay, I have a nomination for Dr. Sprinker. Are there any other nominations? Okay, nominations are now closed. I'm now going to take a roll call vote for Dr. Sprinker as president. Mrs. Klein.
Yes.
Mr. Huziak.
Yes.
Dr. McCosey. Mrs. Mansell. Yes. Mr. Shope.
Yes.
Dr. Sprinker.
Yes.
Mr. Vanzeling.
Yes.
Mr. Wisner.
Yes.
Mr. Zakowitz.
Yes.
Okay, that motion carries. Dr. Sprinker, since you are the president, please reclaim your seat.
Thank you. It's like musical chairs.
Right, everyone. Thanks, everyone. At this time, we would like to open up the floor for nominations for the school board vice president. Do we have any nominations? I would like to nominate Mrs. Klein. Do we have a second? Oh, we don't need a second, I'm sorry. Are there any other nominations? Could we please have a roll call vote?
Mrs. Klein.
Yes.
Mr. Huziak.
Yes.
Dr. Makosi? Mrs. Mansell?
Yes.
Mr. Shup?
Yes.
Dr. Springer?
Yes.
Myself is a yes. Mr. Wisner?
Yes.
Mr. Zekowitz?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, we're going to move on to 1.9, and as you can see, I'm having some technical difficulties. I apologize, but at this point, we're going to talk through the liaison appointments per policy 005. Our liaisons have changed slightly in that some of our positions have been absorbed by other positions. And so we're going to go through those right now. We have appointments that we need to make for the Beaver County Career and Tech, Beaver County Intermediate Unit, the PSBA Board Representative, Buildings and Grounds, Public Relations and Communications, Athletics and Activities, Education, Employee Negotiations, Finance, Personnel, Policy, and Support Services. Over the last few weeks, board members have contacted Dr. Venata or myself to let us know positions that they might be interested in filling. If it is approved by the board, what I'd like to do is just share the slate of candidates for these positions, and then we will just do a vote based on all of them all at one time. If that's okay with everyone. Okay. So Beaver County Career and Tech, we have Frank Makosi. Beaver County Intermediate Unit, Bobby Mansell. PSBA Board Representative, Rachel Klein. Buildings and Grounds, Mark Zakowitz. Public Relations and Communications, Rachel Klein. Athletics and Activities, Ryan Wisner. Education, Adam Vanzelingi. Employee Relations and Negotiations, Rachel Klein. Finance, Matt Shope. Personnel, Andy Huziak. Policy, Carol Springer. Support Services, Adam Vanzelinge. Do we have any questions or discussions about any of the liaisons or appointments?
Did you want to just go over the ones that were rolled up into the other positions, just for clarity?
Certainly, thank you. So 3 of the positions were eliminated and rolled into other ones. So the first one was Board and Staff Enrichment. Previously, I served as that liaison, and that's going to be rolled into the PSBA Board liaison now, which is Rachel Klein. The Transportation Committee and the Food Service Committee were both chaired by Ryan Wisner. One of those, the Transportation Committee, will be moving into Buildings and Grounds, and that would be Mark Zakowitz now. And Food Service moved into Personnel, which would be Andy Huziak.
Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? Do we have a motion to appoint those liaisons and appointments for Beaver County Career and Tech, Beaver County Intermediate Unit, and the PSBA Board Representative? Thank you, Bobby. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mark. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 1.10 is going to be the 2025 school board meeting dates. May I please have a motion to approve the 2025 Blackhawk Board of School Directors meeting dates?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Matt. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Adam. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Question is, are the meetings at the same time? I believe the answer is yes, unless there's any questions or discussion about that. So 6:30? Thank you, Rachel. Item 1.11 is the appointment of a solicitor. We're asking for a motion to reappoint Strausberger, McKenna, Gutnick, and Gefsky for the 2025 calendar year in the amount of $9,000 per month retainer and in conformance with the proposal approved by the board on February 22nd of 2024.
I can make that motion.
Thank you, Mrs. Klein. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Matt. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. 1.12, appointment of school dentist. May I have a motion to approve Dr. Kevin Carter as a school dentist for the 2025 calendar year?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Adam. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mark. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Item number 1.16, I apologize. Item 1.13, appointment of school physician. May I have a motion to appoint Dr. Mitchell Pfeiffer, MD, as the school physician for the 2025 calendar year?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Andy.
I'll second.
Thank you, Bobby. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. 1.14, newspaper of general circulation. May I have a motion to approve the Beaver County Times as the newspaper of general circulation to be used for official notices?
I'll make it.
Thank you, Ryan. Second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Adam. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. 1.15, depository of school funds. May I please have a motion to approve the following as depositories of school funds? PLGIT, PSDLAF, Blackhawk Federal Credit Union, First National Bank, and Zion Bank. May I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Matt. A second?
Second.
Thank you, Rachel. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. 1.16, investment of school funds. I have a motion to approve the following as investments of school funds: West Banco, PLGIT, PSDLAF, Blackhawk Federal Credit Union, PNC Bank, First National Bank, and Huntington Bank.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Andy. A second? Thank you, Bobby. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. And the last agenda item is the closing of the organizational meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Rachel. A second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Adam. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Welcome again, everyone, to the working and voting session of the December school board meeting. This is the call to order, and at this time, Adam, could you please call roll?
Mrs. Klein?
Here.
Mr. Huziak? Here. Dr. McCosy? Mrs. Mansell?
Here.
Mr. Show?
Here.
Dr. Springer?
Here.
Here. Mr. Wisner? Here. Mr. Zakowitz?
Here.
Ed Mike?
Thanks, Adam. 1.3, solicitors report. Do we have any report tonight, Kathy?
I do not, thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for being the temporary president tonight. Great job. 1.4, administrators and superintendent update.
So I do not have a report, but I do believe that Audrey has a report for us.
So at the high school on November 21st, we recognized Children's Grief Awareness Day. Students were encouraged to wear blue, and a banner was placed in the green cafeteria where students could stick butterflies with the names of loved ones who have passed, as well as speech bubbles with encouraging and uplifting messages. Blackhawks Youth Ambassadors Program and the Student Council did a great job organizing this event, and it had a lot of participation from the students. Also, the high school sculpture class took first place in Pittsburgh's gingerbread house competition for the third year in a row, and the agricultural classes took second place. Highland has been participating in the Give a Christmas project. You guys might have seen the banners in the lobby, where they participate in holiday activities to help raise funds for the Salvation Army, and it has been a great success so far. Some students at Highland took part in the National Junior Historian Gingerbread Build, the gingerbread house created by Evangelina Apostolos, Olivia Defiba, and Issa Simon, took first place in the school competition and is now being featured in Pittsburgh. The academic game season has begun, and students attended the propaganda event at Geneva College. 8th grader Lincoln Weir qualified with his high score, and 8th graders Grant Houston and Celeste Kurt placed in the impromptu duo during the fall forensic competition. Also, Biz and Patterson are looking forward to Santa's Workshop, which is sponsored by the PTO. At Santa's Workshop, students can buy gifts for their families. They're also excited that musicians from the high school are coming to perform before the holiday break. So we have a lot of exciting things to look forward to before break, and thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item number 2, public relations and communications. Mrs. Klein.
Thank you. 4 Blackhawk students, Emma Coddington, Shane Howlett, Grace Houston, and Kaylee Skinger, presented their renewable energy proposal, Bridge to the Future, to a panel of experts from U.S. Steel, Shell, and FedEx. Their presentation finished in first place. In addition to a trophy, the students won a $3,000 STEM grant for Blackhawk High School and will be honored at halftime at the Steelers-Browns game on December 8th. Congratulations to them. Make us proud. Second, very exciting, Jennifer Sherrick was nominated for the 2025 Teacher of the Year and will be recognized in Harrisburg. Mrs. Sherrick has been teaching kindergarten in Blackhawk for the past 19 years. She is deeply passionate about early literacy development and dedicates herself to advancing the science of reading in elementary classrooms. To this end, she collaborates with various groups nationwide to promote evidence-based literacy practices. Mrs. Sherrick serves as the Vice President of the Board for Teach My Kid to Read, is a board member for the Pennsylvania branch of the International Dyslexia Association, and contributes to the Teacher Advisory Board for McGraw-Hill. Additionally, she is an active member of the Reading League of Pennsylvania, Decoding Dyslexia PA, Everybody Reads PA, and Teach Plus. As the founder and moderator of the Beaver County Science of Reading Facebook page, Mrs. Sherrick works to foster a supportive community for educators focused on the science of reading. And I just want to, is there anything else that I've missed with that? Please add.
So I'm sure we are all very proud of Mrs. Sherrick, and congratulations, Mom. But on Monday, I believe at 1:30, there's a link. So we could view how the nominations, how the results of everything. It'll be very exciting. I asked Mrs. Burney, I said, can we put that out on social media? And I asked Mrs. Sherrick, I said, would you mind if we shared the link so the world can watch? And she said yes. So we're excited to do that, and just very proud. And also I did ask our students if they would like to attend this evening, but the majority of them are at a basketball game. So they were not able to attend, but they know that we are quite proud of them for that as well.
Thank you. I think a round of applause for Mrs. Sherrick. Blackhawk is very proud of our students' achievements, and we encourage the extracurricular activities that happen in each grade. Please visit each school's websites for updates and happenings in our buildings, including many holiday events this month and concerts. And at this point, it would be when The public would have the opportunity to address the board on current agenda items, and I do not believe that anyone signed them.
Thank you. Agenda item number 3, Beaver County Career and Technology. There is no report, I believe. The intermediate unit, we have no report tonight. Oh, wait, we do. I'm sorry. Thank you. Sorry, Bobby. Would you like
That's
to,
okay.
would you like to give that report tonight?
I would.
Thank you.
It's that time of year again where the Superintendent's Advisory Council had a meeting and they have to put together the joint board for the CTC, the intermediate unit, and the joint school committee. Anyway, in front of each of you is this ballot where we are being asked to vote on these candidates for these committees. And I know all of them, they go to the meetings every month, and they're all volunteers, of course, and unpaid, and they want the job. So my recommendation is put your check mark next to the names for these various duties. It's more work for them, and it's for a wonderful reason. So that's all I have. Thank you.
If the board could do that before they leave this evening, and I will collect those, so we can make sure that it gets back to the intermediate unit. That would be great.
Thank you.
And they have to sign, yes, which is, there's.
Yes, front back
Thank you.
of that ballot.
Oh, excellent, thank you, Dr. Casey.
Agenda item number 5 is the approval of minutes. Do we have a motion to approve the meeting minutes from November 7th, 2024?
I did notice one thing that needs a correction. For the public comment at the very end of the meeting, it says that Stacy Schaefer was speaking.
They can't hear you.
There's a correction that needs to be made for the public comment section. It just had Mrs. Schaefer's name wrong. It's Tracy Schaefer. Thank you.
Do we have any other discussion or questions about the minutes? Do we have a motion for approval?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Andy.
I'll second.
Thank you, Bobby. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes. Finance Committee, I do believe we have a report. Move to full consent? Yes, so we will be moving to full consent for voting. Mr. Shope, did you want to review anything in the Finance Committee notes before we get to the vote?
No.
Okay.
There's nothing really significant.
Thank you. Okay.
We already talked about that grant, so that would be the only thing that I would really mention, but we already talked about.
Okay. Personnel Committee, agenda item number 7. Do we have any questions or discussion about anything in personnel before we move to the consent vote? Okay. Agenda item number 8, Education Committee. Questions, discussion? Number 9, Buildings and Grounds.
Nothing to report.
Thank you. Athletics and Activities Committee, number 10.
Nothing to report.
Policy Committee, we do have some information tonight to share with the community, I believe. Thank you.
So there is a brief memo in the agenda that we can open up, which kind of outlines the procedure and the rationale for it. I know there's been some question, and it's an interesting thing, not policies, but they're ones that are guided by our state mandates and our school code, and those things change throughout the years. Not frequently, but they change. There's a lot of acts all the way from 1, I think we're up to 83 now, many state acts, and 16 and 17, and so many that I lose count of them. But all of these acts have rules in them, whether it's regarding attendance or school safety, and those create policy. And when new acts are created, new policies are created. You may have heard me say earlier in the school year, the last time that we had a full, it appears to be, and I'm making an assumption, but a full review of all of our policies, it looks like 2006. So, almost a quarter of a century, a lot has changed in education. So a lot of things needed to be updated. Some of our numbers for IEPs and our gifted caseloads were out of compliance. We want to make sure that we change those. Some things don't apply anymore to how your schools function, and some things we may need to add. So that's a review for me to go through and make sure that we are in compliance. My intent of reviewing these is to make sure that the district is, again, up to speed and in a sound state. So that's the plan to go through. PSBA is a noted source for policy guidance. Once we review the policies and the board approves them, then they go into PSBA to check. You may see in some of the policies, there's little numbers behind paragraphs. Well, those little numbers are tied to school code or laws or rules. So we send it to the Pennsylvania School Board Association, which we are affiliated with, and they make sure that those numbers are in the right spot. So we look to them for guidance too. So we look at other regional districts, our solicitor, and our administrative team review. So as we go through this, there's a timeline, and I want to make sure that, again, I need to make sure that we're enforcing the policies too, and that we're doing the right things. That's my job. So I do want to make sure that we move through them in a timely fashion. So there's a tentative agenda. It's sort of a goal that I set for myself with the dates. And you can see we've gone through the 100s, the zeros, but the board will see the 100s again in January. And then we'll move through the rest. Hopefully, fingers crossed, by the end of the school year, we would have had a good look at all of these, and that'll kind of reset the deck moving forward. That doesn't mean that the state may not come in July and say, well, you're going to have to change this one. So we may have to do that again, but at least we'll have a good overview of them. Policies that are recommended for review may be voted on, and they don't require 2 reads. So I'll check it and say, board, I don't recommend any changes. It's just a review. So then if someone comes in, they can say, oh, Blackhawk School District, you reviewed this policy in 2024 or 2025. They'll see that there's been some eyes on it since a more recent time than 2006. Policies that are recommended for retirement may be voted on. They don't require 2 reads. So the board can say, I retire it, 1 read, and that's fine. Policies that are recommended for revision may be voted on for 1 read, but this board has gotten in the habit of doing 2 reads. Not 2 votes, but 2 reads. So if we have 2 meetings in January, you read 1 and then vote again. I try to keep it in the schedule, because if it doesn't, then we get kind of lopsided. And that can get really confusing. I think we kind of saw that in November. It got a little confusing. We had a whole bunch there. Some were voting on, some were not voting on. So I'll try to keep it as consistent and clean as humanly possible. And I think revision, these 2 reads are important, because there are things that come up between the first read and the second read for that. Moving forward, I will try to provide a brief explanation of the rationale behind those. And that'll be for your review, and of course the community's review as well, so they can kind of see, oh, that's the reason for it. Some of them are pretty simple, and some of them are a lot more complex. And sometimes it's easier just to say, well, we're going to just replace it. And it's preference with that way. So any questions on that process or any rationale behind it? I know it's a little muddy for someone who may not be working with it a whole lot, but for some reason I enjoy it.
I have a question.
Sure.
Just everything you just explained, it sounds monumentally big and a lot of work. Are you doing this by yourself, or will you have help or any other input?
Yes, that's a great question. So at the beginning of this memo, it is a lot of work, but it's important and it's meaningful. I consider this a foundation. So we're building a house, right? Or we're remodeling, making sure that it's up to code, right? Using builder's terms. So that's sort of a foundational piece. So I'm checking our structure. I'm going through making sure that before we continue our work, that our structure is sound. I'm not saying we don't have a foundation, because we clearly do, but I just want to make sure our structure is sound. So I'm very familiar with it, so it's a lot, but again, it's work that is important and meaningful. I have PSBA. There are other districts, neighboring, and other policies out there that say, let me compare, let me do some cross-examination here. We have our solicitor that provides reference to things that I may not be familiar with. We have our finance director to make sure that our procurement things and numbers and those aspects are up to par, and we have our administrative team. You saw in the last meeting that there were some special education policies. Those go through Dr. Houston first. There were some other policies that I may have questions with, and I'll reach out to our administrative team. Is there a reason for this? I asked Mr. Ford, with our student reps, is this relevant? Do we do these things? Because sometimes we have things in policy, but we don't do them. So why do we have them in policy? And that's not a bad thing. There was just a requirement at one point, maybe in 2006, that we did, but we've kind of changed. So it's okay. But I have a lot of helpers.
I think something that would be good to clarify, maybe both a little bit regarding your question, but also for the public as a whole. There is not a policy committee that is meeting behind closed doors in any way. That this is your recommendations that you're bringing from your administrative team to the board, and then we're meeting as a committee of a whole to discuss them and to look at them in a public setting, correct?
Yes, and that's, you took the words out of my mouth. I was thinking when Dr. Springer was going over the liaisons, and you guys were reorganizing yourselves. And we talk about committee and liaison freely, but a committee has public meetings. We are a committee of the whole. Our board policy states that we are a committee of a whole. And in fact, one of the things that our solicitors spoke about was that policy regarding board functions. It was a little confusing because it had committees, but we were a committee of the whole. So it kind of spoke on both sides. So I tried to clean that verbiage up a little bit, which is why I want to be very, very intentional with calling you liaisons. You are a liaison for these talking points. If I have a question about, I'm a community member and I have a question about athletics, community members are always more than welcome to ask myself or Mr. Riggio those questions at any time. But if you see Mr. Wisner out at some point or think, I want to see about this, then Mr. Wisner can bring that question to myself. And then I can get back to the community members, or he can bring it up as the liaison in board meetings during board discussion, any other things there. So that is the role of the liaisons. But we discuss these policies as a committee of the whole in our public meetings. And that's the reason for, probably it'll help that I have notes by some of those that have modifications.
Do you anticipate, as we move through each of those different sections of policy, that during the first meeting of every month, we'll have some time to dig into that, digest it a little bit, ask questions, and then at the second meeting, there would be time for revision if needed?
Of course.
For us before the vote?
Of course.
Okay.
And we've seen that. Remember, we've seen that with policy that, again, I recommended for retirement. Let's talk about the videoing. So I thought, well, that's strange. Everybody does that. But there's intention behind that. And there may be some things that are specific and intentional for us that we need to have. And that may come, I may not do that. So that will be brought up. I will bring up a policy, and one of you may know, oh, well, that verbiage is important, or there's a reason for that, there's a why for it. So that's the importance of that opportunity for that discussion. And as much as my heart of hearts would like to complete this task by the end of the year, the policy police are not going to come down upon us if we don't. If it extends later, if one or two go out, I mean, there are some policies that, because of legal issues, throughout the country right now, we can't update. So there will be a handful of them, perhaps two handfuls of them, that we will need to revisit at a later time. And that's just the sake of it. But again, I would not be doing my due diligence as your superintendent if I did not give a very, very thorough review of all of our policies for compliance reasons and for relevancy for this district. It's my job.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Dr. Banana about our plans for policy review over the next couple of months? I do not believe there are reports for support services, employee relations negotiations. And so I think at this time we could move to the full consent and ask for a motion for approval for the full consent agenda.
I'll make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
Thank you, Matt. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ryan. Any questions or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Agenda item number 15, additional business. Do we have any public comment on non-agenda items?
My name is Barbara and I live in Chippewa. Why can't retirement suggested policies suggested for retirement have two reads? Your example was perfect about the videotaping. If there's only one read and you vote on it that night, then it's done. I'd like to suggest there be two reads for those if there are any questions about them. And
I do believe that based on our board policy, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we may retire it after one read, but we're not required to. So I think best practice in that particular case would be, we did have questions. We do want to revisit this. It is going to need revision, so there would be a second read. I would think if it's something that's very simple and very common sense and doesn't have a lot of questions, that a retirement after one read could be okay. But I just think what she meant was that we're not required.
I agree with that and understand what you're saying. I just want to make sure that's really clear. And if we are a committee of the whole, which I completely understand what that is, why have we had zero discussion about any of these policy changes that wasn't driven by public comment? Like, that's the part I don't understand. I feel like as a board, there should be questions. If you get the policy ahead of time, there should be discussion about these policies before there are changes. And so far, we haven't really had any. And I also would like to know what's happening with policy 109.1. As the next time we meet, that will be the second read, and then we're going to vote on that.
No, we are going to discuss it during the first meeting at the work session, and the voting will be in the second session. So we will have time to consider that more, ask questions, and discuss it as a board.
Okay, thank you.
Just to clarify, what you're saying, two reads on a case-by-case basis for policy, right?
That is what our policy says.
But there's nothing in policy about policy right now.
I mean, the board could essentially make a motion to say, we want retired policies to have a mandatory two reads. Someone could make that motion. We could decide that and add that to our policy, but currently it's not required. But as Dr. Manata and Mrs. Brown have both said, I think it makes a lot of sense that if there are questions or concerns or discussion, I think a best practice would be that, okay, we're not going to vote on this tonight.
Sure.
We need to like reconsider that, maybe add some edits or improvements, or maybe do some more research and come back to that. I think by requiring two for ones that are just easily retirable isn't expeditious for us. That's my opinion. But if somebody else wants to make a motion to change that, we can do that.
Tracy Schaefer, sorry, I'm losing my voice, Darlington Township. That is, I wanted to talk about the policy audit and how things are happening. I remember clearly when the policy was changed, it was not that long ago, when we went from 2 reads to 1 read. Before that, it was 3 reads and then 2 reads, and now 1 read. I don't think it's best practice to only have 1 read for policy changes.
I'm so sorry. Can you specify what you're referring to? So we're
Policy changes, there used to always be required 2 reads.
Which they're
Yes, and they just recently changed it to now it's only required 1 read.
No.
So you're always doing 2 reads.
You do 2 reads for revision.
With every policy change or just the ones that you feel are necessary? Because you said if you are going to retire them
Right.
or just review them, it only needs 1 read. Which review, that makes sense. If you're not making any changes, that makes sense. But if you're going to retire a policy, just as Barb had said, and you had said, the video recording policy is actually a perfect example as to why we should not retire with just 1 read. So I am just asking if you would maybe consider changing our policy back to requiring 2 reads
For retirement.
for retirement.
Yes.
I think it's just,
For retirement.
I think it would encourage a little more confidence in the board and a little more trust. As I mentioned the last time, it is a bit of a pain to get in, download each policy, sift through the professional jargon, research best practices, because not all of us, do this on a daily basis, understand the state and federal regulations, and make an educated decision. So that's what you are doing, right? But we as a public might want to do that as well with these policies that you are changing. I think that, like I said, I think you should reconsider reinstating the 2nd read policy. It helps provide ample time for the community to keep up with all of the proposed changes in the district. A couple of notes. My family has been a part of this district for 10 years. We have seen 4 superintendents come through in multiple board changes. I have learned that it is not wise to blindly trust the decisions that are made and that they will be what is best for our students, our teachers and staff, or our community. Especially now with the future of education being so uncertain, these policies that you put in place are of the utmost importance. I don't understand why this process needs to be rushed. If it has truly been 18 years since this has been done, I don't know why we have to review all of these policies in just a short few months. I know you say that that's your job, but it certainly isn't your only job, and it isn't your job alone. I think it should be a joint effort between you and the board and administration and the community. That's best practice. And last meeting, there were over 20 policy changes and no discussion. So am I to assume that everybody on the board was in complete agreement with all of those policy changes? Or am I to assume that no one knew what was happening there? I know it may not seem, like I said before, with the ill attendance, but we are paying attention and we do care what's happening. So consider giving us the time to review all of your hard work before you vote on it. Thank you.
Thank you for that feedback. And the intention of tonight's presentation, the board did ask Dr. Venata to review our process in more detail for how we're going to review the policies in 2025. As Dr. Venata mentioned, we have an aggressive goal, but we may not get there. We might not get there. That's our goal.
12 to 18 months. I don't think it's too fast.
Well, your
Hopefully
memo
we can get
said
through it.
school year, so that's just a few more months, really. I mean, we're almost halfway through. Your memo initially said by the end of the school year, which it is a very lofty goal, especially for those of us who have more going on in our lives and reviewing policy changes.
So I do think that the board and Dr. Benata listened to the feedback that we were getting from the public in November. And we are not having that vote this evening.
Right, I appreciate that, because that was a whole lot.
So, these 100 policies are some of the most intensive that there are, as I think you've mentioned, that the rest will be somewhat easier. So really, we are going to have November, December, we'll have a work meeting in January, and then we'll be voting on it at that second meeting in January. So I would think that that's ample time to go through, particularly when the changes are mostly based on the verbiage from the PSBA. And so it's standard verbiage of what you're changing it to. And we're not really introducing a new way of doing anything. We're just maybe cleaning up the language a little bit with the way that we're doing it. I guess if we were making a major change to, I can't even think of an example of what it would be. But, really, I think we're seeing this whole process work pretty well, that we're listening to what the public's saying. We're, asking the superintendent to sort of change what's happening, how she's doing things, and you were very receptive to that. And I think the way you put out here today is very helpful, so that we can all see that. And as far as another just area where I see things working the way that they should, is that when there was discussion about the retirement of the video, that we did not only not vote on it that night, but we're not even probably going to vote on it. We're not going to change that at all. So I think the system's working.
I agree. I just feel like this proposed schedule, like for pupils, all of the 200s we're going to do just in February, that to me seems a bit lofty. But again, I'm not the expert going over these policies. Maybe it is that simple, but for those of us who have a lot more going on, it seems like reviewing all of the employee policies, 300s, 400s, 500s in 1 month, it might just be a bit much.
Well, I'm sorry if I could just add one thing. I think the board, part of my concern was, look, we're out of compliance on some of this stuff, right? And so the sooner we can get in compliance, the better. Now we're members of PSBA. We're leaning on them as, I'm not a policy expert. I would say most of us here, Brian might be, I don't know. But most of us here are not policy experts. And so we do have a couple, fortunately we have a few people, Dr. Johanna being one of them, who has a lot of experience with it. So yeah, I personally am leaning very heavily on PSBA and the administration, as well as Dr. Venata to really provide the expertise in what are best practices. But from my standpoint, it's like, hey, I see a lot of risk in us not being in compliance. And so I do think it's an aggressive schedule. I don't know if I would sign up for it personally, but she's a machine. So I appreciate that she's going through these with such veracity. But I understand where you're coming from. It is a lot to read, but on the other hand, I think it would be, if we can achieve the goal, I think it really does set us up really well for the next year going into it. And when we can at least, as a district, feel like, hey, okay, our watermark is at compliance. There will always be policy changes, but the fact that we haven't done it in almost 20 years, I think is a little crazy.
I think it's very concerning, the fact that we are out of compliance with many of them. So I think that outweighs, in some ways, just really taking our time with it, and because we can always go back and change things if we needed to. So, but really, I think that this will keep us on track, and I think we should have enough time to be reviewing everything.
Well, I think it's awesome that people care, right? I think it's great that you guys care and you're actually going in and trying to do it, because you probably know more about it than I do. In all reality, I have to read these things, and then I have to go, okay, let me log into PSBA, let me find some more information, or it's for those of us that don't have expertise or experience in it, it is really hard. It's a daunting task. So again, I'm relying very heavily on the people who do know, with the reference materials that they have to provide us with the best guidance and to provide the community with the best guidance. But I will say that, we have talked about this of, hey, look, are we getting the right feedback and are we providing the right information? I know it is hard to go on the website sometimes to download these things. I run into the same thing sometimes, all these PDFs. So, to me, it's kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of another. We have to get through them as quickly as possible.
And I think the chart that Johanna will be providing with the rationale for some of those changes will be very helpful. And based on the feedback, even that we're hearing tonight, I'm wondering if we move into a policy that might be very heavy, that we will all have a lot of questions about, or perhaps there's like a political piece that may cause some feelings one way or another. Maybe you call that out at the beginning and say, hey, listen, policy 242 is going to take us a lot longer than the rest. Maybe we finish all of those and then really dig into policy. I don't even know what 242 is. I'm just saying that, but
Yeah, 242.
because to our community's point, there will be some need to dig into some, but not most. So we'll want to give time and value to those and then move forward with compliance on the others.
And I do think that when you look at the list, it's 200 all in 1 month, that definitely can be kind of daunting to look at. But it's probably good to recognize that we don't know until we go through them how many of those are just going to be, oh yeah, there's no recommendation for any change. So we might only have to do 90 or not 90, the opposite of that, like maybe 5% or actually review and make changes to a small number of them. But I would say that if we go through the 200s and it does look like we are going to be doing a lot of changes for those, I would be more than happy to suggest that we split those up into multiple months, just to make sure that we are not just kind of slamming things through. So I think it's one of those things that we'll let it go through. If it looks like we're getting to a point where it's going to be a little much for a month, I might make the recommendation for us to push it along a little bit longer for that set.
So it's also interesting because, again, these go back to state code and compliance. And it saddens me that there is a lack of trust. And I am well aware of some things that have occurred. So I try to be sensitive to those aspects. And one fine day, I would hope that that is no longer a concern or an issue. However, that means that I need to make sure that, again, we are in compliance with it. I do not use policy as a sword. I use policy to make sure that we are in compliance with code and regulations as that aspect. That's it. There shouldn't be political policies. It should be policies based upon laws. So that is the goal, to make sure that they are based upon laws, period. So that is the intent of this, and it is a tentative schedule. So sometimes I do get a little too ambitious, and that'll, other things happen and I get behind, so I did say tentative, in my memo. But many of those are repetitive. Many of the pupil ones are based upon laws. So I just need to check laws. And many of the employment ones are repetitive. I've asked, because the 3, 4s, and 5s, why do we have to have 3, 4s, and 5s? Why can't we just have 300s? All employees collapse them. But that may not be relevant, but you'll see a lot of repetition. So it's not as daunting as one may think once you start to understand it a little bit. But that's all that I have to say. But thank you guys. Thanks for the conversation.
Mrs. Brown.
Don't take this the wrong way, but it's not necessarily a lack of trust. Most of the people sitting at this table I've known for at least a decade. It isn't a lack of trust. It's a lack of experience in your seat and a lack of experience in our district. And It's not that we think you're trying to do something wrong. That isn't it. And if you're taking it that way, I apologize, because that's not how it's meant.
No, it's okay. I was just addressing.
Right, but it's not necessarily, it's not that I don't think you have the right mindset. I do, or I wouldn't have supported the majority of the people that are sitting here. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the fact that I've been sitting in school board meetings for 18 years. Yes, we did used to have 3 reads for a policy change. She's correct. And then it changed to 2 reads. And then for a little while, it changed to 1 read. And then one time we even suspended the policy completely so we could pass things all in one evening. It's the truth.
Yeah, oh, I remember.
And I've missed 4 school board meetings in 18 years. I've been to more school board meetings practically than days of work. And that rapid change is concerning because most of the people that are sitting at this table haven't been at a ton of school board meetings or haven't been in this district for a long time. And so you don't have all of that background. I'm not saying that it's not like you're not trying to do the right thing. You are trying to do the right thing, but you have to do the right thing. It's like you don't know what you don't know. And so you have to be understanding of that, especially when some people have been sitting here for a long time. And we did have a period where there were 3 reads. We did have a period when it was 2 reads. Then we had a couple months when it was 1 read. We had a meeting when there was no reads. You just read and vote that minute. So those things all happened. And I understand that you might not even know that, but it did happen. I sat here, I watched it. And so you have to be aware of this, what you don't, sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. And there's no other
Thank you for the
way
feedback.
to describe it. It sounds dumb, but that's how you describe it.
Thank you. And I also will remind the board that the number of reads can always be changed with a board vote. So if that ever is the intention of this board, or if anybody wants to reconsider that, we can talk about that at the next policy work session. Do we have any school directors who would like to speak tonight?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Dr. Mahosey?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm not sure I heard correctly before because I couldn't talk. Did someone nominate me for one of those liaison positions?
Yes.
What?
The Beaver County Career and Tech Liaison.
Yeah, I'm going to turn that down. I do not have the time and will not make the time commitment in lieu of some of my personal things I've gone through. So,
Thank you.
Dr. Sprinkler? Did he just turn that down?
Yes.
He did.
Is there any way that a couple people can share the responsibilities? Because I know you said it gets difficult for you with your work schedule.
I don't know if the CTC would allow that. I know,
I would be more than happy to speak with Mrs. Delvecco, the director of the CTC, to see, it isn't uncommon sometimes to have a 1 and a 2. If someone can't make it.
School district does do that.
Right, so if you, I think I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I think I saw you say, I'll do it again.
Yeah.
If you can do that, but then perhaps if there are some meetings, I know she has the meetings prepared and the dates in advance. If there's someone else that can pinch it for you every now and then.
My only goal was to make sure the district is represented. I mean, so however that happens, I'm willing to help.
Well, I'm active there as well. I go monthly, so I can definitely make sure that, we have representation. We have a large student population that attends there. So I think it's wise that we keep our investment.
So our plan will be for the next meeting then to vote on an A and B, or do we need to do that tonight?
I think that if Andy can fill in.
So I think that we would need a nomination, which,
I'll nominate him.
thank you, Bobby. And a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Mark? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. So Andy Huziak will be the liaison for the Beaver County Career and Tech.
Do we need to name and nominate a second person, or do we need to check with the Beaver County Just technically them to do that, because I think that's fair to you, since
They have.
you did say this was a hardship for you.
Yeah, they have a reorg meeting on the 12th, which I will attend. And I can discuss with the board there, because it should be, a decision through the board. So, but I did see past practice, Beaver has done it a couple of times, so I don't think it's going to be an issue. So I'll just kind of clarify what we're allowed to do about that.
Do we have comments from any other school directors at this time?
I just wanted to say that, this is our kind of anniversary for being on the board. And I'm happy and proud for all the things that we have accomplished, especially, with those who were here when we came in. We've done a lot of good things together, and I'm looking forward to the next year.
Yeah, just real quick, I attended orchestra concerts for 6th grade, 7th, 8th, and high school. And the high school orchestra really stood out to me. And I have a daughter in 6th grade who's in orchestra, and leaving there, I begged her to stay in because the high school orchestra is phenomenal. I mean, they look like they've been playing for 30 years when they're 18 and 17. So it was just a really, really beautiful experience and great concert, as well as choral concert for the K through 2. Last night, attended that, 5,000 people there, but other than that, it was wonderful too. They all did a great job, so that's all I have.
It was packed.
Any other board director comments? Well, on behalf of the board, we'd like to wish the entire Blackhawk community the very happiest of holidays and safe and very well new year. Our next meeting will be on December, I'm sorry? No, it will not be. It will be on January 9th. I think we'll need to change that. January 9th, is that correct? At 6:30. Here at Highland Middle School. Perfect, thank you. And do we have a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting?
I make a motion.
Thank you, Matt. Do we have a second?
I'll say.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion, meeting adjourned.